News First, Newsline.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Newsline. The cost of living for Sri Lankans has increased quite dramatically, partly because of the COVID-19 crisis and also the economic crisis beyond that is one of the main reasons why the cost of living has increased so much. However, inflation has come down to a certain degree, but of course the damage has already been done, and I'm pretty sure, as our viewers are aware, the reduction in inflation does not mean that the cost of living has gone down. It only means that the rate of increase in the cost of living has gone down. Now, in this equation of the cost of living, essentials like basic food items, water and electricity costs are of paramount importance, and an increase in these very basic essentials that are needed for everyday life of the citizens of Sri Lanka impacts the lives of Sri Lankans across the board, from whichever class of society that you're from. Sri Lanka had 2 electricity tariff hikes during the course of this year, quite massive compared to the number of electricity tariff hikes that we've had during the past few years. People felt it really hard. Businesses felt it, and there are even stories where certain people are now completely refraining from using electricity because it just costs so much and they can't afford it. It is against such a backdrop that now we are talking, or at least the authorities that be are proposing and asking the PUCSL of Sri Lanka for an electricity tariff hike. Now, to discuss these matters and much more, we've got with us a former chairman of the Public Utilities Commission, of course, a vociferous chairman who was known for his strong opinions, who, of course, spoke against electricity tariff increases. He's none other than Mr. Janaka Ratnayake. A very good evening and welcome to the show.
Thanks once again.
So, let me guess, from the onset of the program, you are vehemently against another tariff increase. Would you mind informing our viewers of the reasons for this? I'm pretty sure many of them would be happy with your position. But of course, one thing that we need to all understand is that there is a cost of production. And if we do not pay our dues, or at least the cost of production to cover the amount that the CEB is spending on producing electricity, it's again the general public's taxpayers' rupees that are used to fund the CEB, and one way or another we will have to pay for what we use. So the government or the authorities are saying that this increase in electricity tariff is because the cost of production, the cost of our laborers, the cost of our engineers, the lack of water because of the drought, all of these factors have contributed to an increase in the cost of production, and that is the reason why we need another electricity tariff hike. How do you oppose this?
I'll probably start going back to year 2022. And the first price revision came into effect in August last year. That is after almost 7 years of not having any tariff hike.
Right.
In August last year, CB wanted a massive price hike, which they could not justify, and therefore reasonable increase was approved by PUCSL. And then again in December, they wanted within almost 4 months of time that they want another revision, which again they wanted a huge tariff hike, and again with the calculation, based on the calculations, the PUCSL recommended certain percentage with the increment which was given, the tariff hike was given illegally without looking at the recommendations of PUCSL. And we all knew about what happened in the month of February, while I was away from the country without the recommendation of PUCSL. With the influence of politicians, the certain members got together and they agreed almost the revision that CB wanted. Then only, now see the political hierarchy, and according to the PUCSL Act, there could be 2 revisions per year, they said. That is to effect from 1st of January and 1st of July. And the second revision was again was on the offing, and PUCSL had to consider in July another revision. Then what happened from July to date? And because of the reasons that you mentioned about a drought that which prevailed almost a month ago, now we have a completely different scenario, that we have a flood situation. And during this month of, I think, September, CB incurred certain losses. But if you look at month of August, CB made a 20 billion profit. Now the month of August, due to the scarcity of generation of electricity by water, they have said that they have made a loss of around 30 billion. And if you look at the cost, now see, if you look at the cost of generating the electricity is ranging from 2 rupees to 90 rupees, depending on the source. So if you if you use the hydropower, it will cost you around less than 3 rupees to generate. Now this year what they say is, because of the drought situation, the generation what they expected of around 5,000 gigawatt hours had come down to 3,500. So to cover the losses, that they have used thermal powers. And again, if you look at thermal, I think the 2 out of 3 generation plants at Norachole is out of order. And therefore they need to use the other thermal sources using furnace oil, diesel and petrol. Diesel, not petrol. By using the fuel to generate power in these old generating machines, which is under the CB and the private sector, sometimes it will cost you around 80 to 90 rupees per unit. Cost will be around 80 to 90 rupees. So therefore, when the situation of a drought there, you cannot use hydro, then the 2 plants of Norachole is not working, they are compelled to use other sources, where the price will go up. And end of the day, because of this mismanagement, now see, one plant of Norachole is closed for maintenance, and it was to be like restarted a month ago, but it has not come. The third plant is on and off. You see in news that is breaking down. So because of this, I think you said that the cost of production is due to various reasons, but I feel since the entity is mismanaged. Now see, from August 2022, the electricity price has gone up by 250%. The person who paid 900 rupees is paying almost 4,000 rupees. The person who paid 3,000 rupees paying almost 10,000 rupees per month. And again, you have to mind you that this is a fixed cost of any consumer, and they have no choice. Bill is there, they are giving probably like 15 to 20 days, you must pay, otherwise there will be disconnection. So therefore, this is, as you said, that if you look at the Maslow's theory, these needs are very basic at the bottom level. You are looking at the food, the electricity, shelter and all those things, basic needs, and we are compromised on basic needs. People have no electricity, people have to pay huge price on water, huge price on fuel and things like that. And how do they manage their lives? And we have heard, if you look at the daily papers or listen to maybe the news, you see that we hear that maybe 1/3 or 2/3 of the people are starving. In a situation like that, due to the mismanagement CBs and the other entities, so the price has to be paid by the innocent consumers. Now see, if this time the request, this is the request that CB has made on the 26th of September, asking the price revision from 1st of October. And whereas in this year, the 2 revisions have already been granted. And this is not legitimate, this is not according to the constitution, not according to the act, or maybe against the mandate of the people. So looking at 3 revisions per year, this is not quite practical and ethical, or by any standards it is not. I think CDB shouldn't have requested this. But the asking is the next January's price revision to be affected with immediate effect. Like the way that they wanted in December, until the PUCSL is done with the calculations, the cabinet wanted the revision to be affected immediately, which the commissioners of PUCSL did not agree. So that is where the conflict started, and I had to leave my job. I have no regrets. We are having always talking about the people who are subject to this, unnecessary illegal revisions of tariff hike. So this is due to the mismanagement of this entity. Now say the entity who made 250 billion a year ago is making almost 600 billion. So they have got almost around 400 billion new money coming into that, but still this entity cannot manage. That's why in the month of August 20 billion profit, September 30 billion loss, and October they are asking for another 100 billion increase. Now say with this revision, if they are asking 20%, if the price is increased by 20%, the CB is looking at around 700 billion revenue. Now who's going to pay this? The innocent consumers who paid 250 billion is now paying 500 billion more. Now in an economy, we are in an economy where the economy is not growing, it is shrinking. Last year now 9%, and according to the reports that we see every day, I think economy will go down by almost 4%. In a situation where the economy is shrinking, how the government and entities can charge huge amount of price without giving income to the people? How can you take it back? So it is not quite possible. Then what happens when they pay these utility bills? They are unable to do their other work, maybe unable to get their 3 meals a day. This is quite unreasonable, illegal, and they should not request the tariff.
So, Mr. Ratnayake, now you were the chairman of the PUCSL for quite some time. You've had very strong opinions, similar opinions regarding the CEB. You say that the CEB is corrupt. You say the CEB is mismanaged.
Yes.
Of course, there are many people in Sri Lanka who would agree with you. There are certain people who would not. But in your perspective, what really is the solution? As in, we need to look towards development, and lower utility costs across the world has translated itself into more opportunities, more room for development, more room for international investors to find a country attractive for production, industrialization. We're talking about industrial zones, we're talking about factories being brought into Sri Lanka. Now, all of these need electricity, and if a global brand is to come to Sri Lanka, or even an international investor is to come to Sri Lanka needs to be attractive in an economic sense.
Yes.
So our end goal should be to try and minimize the losses of the CEB, minimize the mismanagement of the CEB, so that it would translate itself into lower electricity tariffs. In your opinion, how do we achieve that?
Now see, every 2 years CB prepares a long-term generation plan for 20 years.
Okay.
That's the longest plan that any entity in Sri Lanka has it. Now this plan has been there for last decade. What happens is you see something in the plan, but nothing materializes. Since 2014 until today, except 200 or 300 megawatts of power plants, there were not much of plants were established due to many reasons, especially the involvement of corrupt, ignorant politicians. What happened to the fourth plant of Norachole, the coal plant? The president who were expelled by the people decided that to stop, but the fourth plant of Norachole maybe within 1 or 2 days. The previous president, due to certain influences from certain countries, stopped another big plant. These politicians who are ignorant and not having economic sense, they take decisions where we are facing a issue today using this. Now see, certain plants, I told you that more than 30 years old and their lifetime is gone. Certain CB plants which they are probably getting from the private sector, they are too old to produce electricity. And sometimes I told you a unit will cost you around 70 to 80 rupees when they use furnace oil and diesel.
So the fact that are you saying that the fact that the power plants are old means that it costs more to produce?
Yes, the efficiency has gone.
Okay.
Because their lifetime is gone. And instead of getting into new projects and new plants, now say we are talking about renewable of 70% and 30%. Now renewable energy, we have many sources. We have hydro, we have enough sunlight, we have enough wind. So name, we have all the natural resources to produce enough power from these sources. What happens is, although as I told you, although it is in the plan of long-term generation plan, these plans, due to many reasons, are not implemented for last maybe a decade. So therefore only that we are facing this. And say when the one plant of Norachol is broken down, we need to use other thermal sources. Since we need to manage our hydropower for agriculture and other drinking and power generation, we need to use these old plants from the private sector where there is a high cost. Now the high cost has to be passed on to the consumer, innocent consumers. Now they say it's a cost recovery. But if you look at the losses that they have made in CV for last maybe a decade, is certain running out to billions. Now when they are trying to recover those, again the innocent consumers have to pay. Now see, if you look at this request that they have made a few days back, they are looking at the lowest level of consumers who are using 0 to 30 units. That means maybe 1 or 2 bulbs at home, and who are at the lowest level of the economies, grassroots level, they are looking at 80% increase on their rate from 10 rupees to 18 rupees. And you have around 1.5 million consumers who are using less than 30. Now from 30 to 60, they are looking at around 32% increment. Can these people who are unable to find their day-to-day life living pay this? It is not possible. And there's another point here. Now you look at the increment that they are asking for from this latest request. They are looking at the industries and the tourism sector of almost more than 40% increase. Can these industries survive in this situation? I'm looking. We were talking about now say you were talking about inflation. Now if you look at last 2 months, we are looking at deflation. Deflation means we are heading for a huge economic crisis. Now the best example for this is just before the World War II, the entire world had a recession and economies are running into deflation. Deflation is worse than inflation. When there is a deflation, this aggregated demand has come down. So people cannot buy because there's no they don't have buying power. Surplus the products and no demand. So it is more worse. The deflation is more worse and not good for the economy than a reasonable inflation. So we need to maintain the inflation maybe between 5 to 8%, to have a healthy growth. But we are going against all these the economic parameters, and we talk rubbish over here. Politicians do not understand this. They are ignorant.
Speaking on the specific subject of electricity tariffs, with the reforms that are at least proposed by the Minister of Energy and of course the Cabinet as a whole, you might be privy to much more information than the general public is. You might be more understanding of those information than the general public is. What's your take on these proposals? Would it at least put a small dent in this problem that we're facing?
Now the subject Minister of Power and Energy is talking about reforms and restructuring. And he understands reform and restructuring is to break this big entity into small pieces. Break into this big entity into small pieces. Now say reforms that they are trying to introduce to Ceylon Electricity Board is to break the giant into 14 pieces and even to privatize this hydropower plants which has been there for generations, for many years. Now in a situation like drought or maybe in a flood, can a private sector entities can handle these national issues? It is not possible. Now say when you are giving Mahaveli and Randenigal and all those national the resources to private sectors, will they use it for economic? They will use only for profit orientation, not for economic goodwill of the country. And therefore if the minister thinks and the politicians thinks, the ruling politicians thinks that breaking the institutions like CB and CPC breaking into pieces. Now see what happened to CPC. Now we were talking about reforms. Reforms is, giving 150 sheds to another party. Now these sheds were, perfectly okay. The problem was that we did not have enough foreign exchange to import fuel. Now by merely giving 150 sheds to one party, another 150 to another party, you think that they are trying to fix our energy crisis? What happens is, now say X party is giving 150 numbers of sheds. They will use maybe 200, 300 million of dollars to import the first consignment using their own money, then sell it to us. Do we pay in dollars? No, we pay in rupees. Now next time they collect rupees and go to our banks, our state banks, People's Bank or BOC, and ask for dollars to import the next consignment. Now if the minister thinks that, giving 150 sheds to somebody, he can, restructure and reform CPC, is highly, misunderstood. So he he does not know the subject.
But
now breaking
that is not the only step that they've proposed. Now
yes,
is it?
Yes. Now up to now that is what we see only. Now by giving 150 sheds to Sinopec, what has happened to CB? They have lost their revenue in selling diesel and petrol by 20 to 40%. Now what happens to the CPC at the end? A huge entity with 3,000 people. And when we now say that's what I'm telling you, restructuring and reforms is now reforms and the restructuring and rehabilitation of this entity should be first. You need to probably have some disciplines within the organization. You fix the entity first. Now see, last year's August till to date, CEB given 250% increase, new blood infusion of money of around 400 billion. Still they cannot manage this. You fix it first. Now say, if you do not fix CEB, can you get a better price from an investor? Who will pay a premium for loss making entity? And who will compromise your national security by giving 900 megawatts of power plants at Noracholi to a private party? 1/3. So that private party can take a decision tomorrow to shut down for some reason, because it's like, profit oriented, and the companies, they are given to companies registered under the Companies Act of 2007. Now reforms and restructuring of national entities should be to produce better production service and give the benefit to the consumer. Now what happened now? Sinopec came 2 months back. The subsidy minister said, when you have better competitors, you get a reduced price. Now what happened last 2 months? The fuel prices went up by twice. Now what has happened even last the month? Who announced the price hike? Sinopec announced the price hike before CPC. Now this is, if someone thinks that, breaking these entities into small pieces and giving to some small players to run sheds and maybe, privatize these national resources, I don't think that you get the required the support, or I don't think that you get into your plans. It is not quite possible.
But Mr. Ratnayake, now nothing was happening, at least
now something is happening
during the previous years. I mean, before all of this reform came into play, before the general public stood up and said enough is enough, nothing was happening. Now something is happening, and you're not happy with the something that is happening. So what do you propose they do to fix these institutions?
You need to bring financial disciplines. You need to reduce corruption. You have to manage these entities first. Now, see, from 250 billion to 700 billion, still they can't manage. Maybe within another 2-3 months, they will say that they need another hike, because we have another small issue, maybe in another plant. So what they need to do is, now say you have decided on 30-70, renewable 70%. Take appropriate actions immediately and have maybe renewable energy plants. So have they started anything? No, nothing. They are talking about reforms, but they are not talking to fix this energy crisis that we are having. Now what happens, unless we start now, maybe after those plants will take maybe 2-3 years to be implemented and commissioned. So without starting any major project, so they are talking about reforms and breaking the entities into pieces and privatizing it. It won't bring the required results.
Thank you very much, Mr. Janaka Ratnayake. Of course, that's all the time we have on Newsline for tonight. And of course, just like you said, that you're not quite agreeable with the steps that have been taken to reform either the CPC or the CEB. You said you were of the opinion that the government should first do away with corruption, fix the mismanagement at these companies. Even when we speak about the IMF regulations or the conditions that they have imposed on Sri Lanka, the government seems to be taking all necessary steps, including increasing taxes, reforming state institutions, privatizing certain entities, relaxing import restrictions. They seem to be doing all of that quite well without taking steps to address corruption in Sri Lanka. And of course, the general public will get an opportunity hopefully next year to decide on where you want Sri Lanka to be in the next 5 years. Vote wisely and you might succeed. Take care and good night.